What if, right when you needed help the most, fate sent someone your way carrying a secret powerful enough to change everything? This is the story of Emma Blake, a young woman on the verge of collapsing, not knowing that fainting at an airport would be the first step toward the greatest miracle of her life. Now take a deep breath, because this is one of those heartwarming stories that reminds us that sometimes what feels like the end is just the beginning. New York was a whirlwind of sounds and rushing people, the kind of place where lives crossed paths and unfolded without anyone even noticing. Right in the middle of that sea of people at JFK Airport, Emma Blake was struggling to stay on her feet. With a trembling hand resting on her almost 8 months pregnant belly, she dragged a small suitcase through the endless terminal halls. Every step was a battle against exhaustion, loneliness, and the doubts pounding in her mind. She had nowhere to go, no one waiting for her. Just a one-way ticket to Savannah, Georgia, and the fragile hope of a fresh start. The stifling heat of the airport, mixed with barely a few hours of sleep, made everything even worse. The world started spinning. The voices around her turned distant like they were coming from underwater. Emma blinked, trying to steady herself, but it was too late. Everything went dark. When she came to, she had no idea where she was. The first thing she noticed was a fresh scent of mint and leather. Then the feeling of something soft under her head. A folded-up jacket. "Hey," a low, worried male voice called out. "Stay calm. You fainted, but you're safe now." Emma blinked, confused, staring at the blurry face of a man kneeling next to her. He looked out of place in that setting. Plain cotton shirt, a bit of scruffy beard, gray eyes hiding a buried sadness. "My purse," she mumbled, trying to sit up. "It's right here with you," he said, sliding the strap into her hand. "Don't worry, I already called for help." Emma barely had time to thank him before she spotted 2 paramedics rushing toward her. The stranger stepped back to give them room, but his eyes never left her. While they checked her over, Emma felt shame burning under her skin. She didn't want to cause a scene, didn't want people staring. All she wanted was to disappear. "You're all right, miss," one of the paramedics said kindly, smiling at her. "You're just dehydrated and very tired." Emma nodded, feeling tears threaten to spill. She wasn't going to cry. Not here. After answering a few questions, they helped her into a wheelchair, and that's when she noticed. The man was still there. "You don't have to stay," she said, her voice rough and uncertain. He just shrugged, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I don't leave people behind." Before she could say anything, the paramedic jumped in. "Do you have someone meeting you in Savannah? Any family?" Emma hesitated. She didn't. Just a vague promise of a job, a chance as shaky as the life growing inside her. She opened her mouth to answer, but shame held her back. It was the stranger who spoke up. "If she doesn't, I'll make sure she gets there safe." Emma stared at him, surprised. He just smiled, that calm and steady kind of smile that seemed to promise more than words ever could. At that moment, Emma didn't know who he was. She didn't know the secret he was carrying. She didn't know that the man who saved her that day would not only change her fate, but also change everything she believed about love, trust, and second chances. Emma tried to turn down the help. Pride had always been an old companion, hard to let go of. But when she tried to stand, dizziness made her sway, and she realized she needed more than ever to accept what life was offering her. The man, she still didn't know his name, stayed by her side as the paramedics finished up. Quietly, without pushing, like he was just used to holding up the world for people who needed it, without ever asking for anything in return. "You need to eat something," he suggested, his voice calm and steady. Emma hesitated. She barely had enough money for food. Getting to Savannah was the priority. The man seemed to read her mind. He pointed to a small cafe across the terminal. "Come on, my treat, no arguments." Emma wanted to protest, but hunger and exhaustion won. She nodded. Small gestures, she thought, could mean the difference between falling and getting back up. They sat at a table tucked away in the corner. The cafe was simple, smelling of fresh bread and strong coffee. The waitress brought water and menus, but Emma didn't even touch hers. "I'm fine with just a glass of water," she said quietly. The man watched her for a long moment, like he understood the battle she was fighting wasn't just physical. He ordered a sandwich and a juice for her, ignoring Emma's silent protest. "You don't have to do this," she murmured. He gave a half smile. Maybe I do. Sometimes helping someone else is exactly what we need, too. It was a curious answer. Emma really looked at him for the first time. He seemed to be in his early 30s, the lines on his face hinting that life hadn't always been kind, but there was a quiet peace about him, a strength that didn't come from arrogance, but from someone who had lost a lot and was still standing. "My name's Noah," he said, reaching out his hand. Emma hesitated for just a split second before taking it. Emma Blake. His touch was firm and warm, steady. For a moment she wanted to hold on a little longer than she should. "Emma Blake," he repeated like he was committing it to memory. "Nice to meet you, Emma." The sandwich arrived and Emma ate slowly, trying to ignore how embarrassed she felt about being so obviously in need. Noah didn't push. He just sat there, chatting about light things. The weather, delayed flights, the awful airport food. Emma found out Noah was traveling too, but he didn't give away many details. Something in his eyes told her there was more to his story than he was letting on. When she finished eating, Emma leaned back in her chair, feeling a little bit of the weight lift off her. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Noah just smiled. "Tell me something, Emma," he began, resting his elbows on the table. "Where were you headed?" She hesitated. "Savannah," she said, barely above a whisper. "And what's waiting for you there?" Emma looked down at her hands, fiddling with the simple ring on her finger. That ring was the only keepsake she had from her mother, a reminder of a time when the world felt less scary. "A job," she finally said. "At least I hope so." Noah nodded, his gaze steady. "Then let's make sure you get there safe." Emma blinked, confused. "You don't have to do that." He smiled again, that smile that seemed to promise things she wasn't sure she was ready to hear. "Maybe I have more reasons than you think." Emma frowned, intrigued. Noah didn't explain, and Emma, too tired to push, just let herself lean into the first genuine kindness life had offered her in a very, very long time. What she didn't know was that Noah Blake, the man who saved her, wasn't just a generous stranger. He was the key piece of a fate that had started to unfold long before she fainted that day. Emma's flight was scheduled for 3 hours later, enough time, according to Noah, for her to get some rest before boarding. He took her to a quieter part of the airport, away from the hustle and bustle of arrivals and departures. They found a row of empty seats near a huge glass window overlooking the runway. The sky outside was gray, threatening rain, a perfect reflection of Emma's mood. "You should try to get some sleep," Noah suggested, his voice low, almost a whisper. Emma hesitated. She wasn't used to trusting strangers, especially not one so present. But something inside her told her Noah wasn't like the others. She closed her eyes just for a moment, just to rest, When Emma woke up, the daylight had shifted. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky gold and orange. She sat up abruptly, her heart racing. Noah was still there, sitting in the seat next to her, looking at his phone. When he noticed she was awake, he tucked it away and smiled. "It's all good," he said. "You still have an hour." Emma breathed a sigh of relief, surprised she had slept so deeply in such a noisy place. But somehow, next to him, she felt safe. "Thank you," she murmured. "Really?" Noah tilted his head like he was saying, "It's nothing." For a moment, they just sat there in silence, watching planes take off and land. It was Emma who broke the silence. "You didn't tell me," she started, her voice soft. "Where you're headed." Noah smiled a little sadly. "Georgia, too." Emma raised an eyebrow, surprised. "Coincidence? Maybe," he answered, enigmatic. Emma felt a flicker of doubt, but she quickly pushed it away. Life had already taken so much from her. Maybe it was time to believe that not everything had to be a trap. "And what's waiting for you there?" she asked, throwing his question back at him. Noah looked out toward the golden horizon, like he was searching for an answer that wasn't there. "A reckoning," he said, his voice heavy with things left unsaid, "and maybe a new beginning." Before Emma could ask more, the airport loudspeaker announced the boarding for her flight. She looked at Noah, hesitating. She didn't want to go alone, but she didn't want to ask for anything, not anymore. He understood, like he could read the fear hidden behind her brave face. "I'll walk you to the gate," he said, getting to his feet. "Don't worry." Emma stood up too, feeling her belly heavier than ever. Noah grabbed her suitcase before she could even protest, and they walked side by side through the brightly lit hallway. When they got to the boarding gate, Emma turned to him. "Thank you," she said again. But this time the words came out stronger, full of real, deep gratitude. Noah just smiled, but his eyes said a lot more. They said, "You're not alone." Emma felt something inside her crack, a wall she had built a long time ago. I hope everything works out for you," she said sincerely. Noah nodded. "You too, Emma Blake." And with one last smile, she boarded the plane. What Emma didn't know was that Noah's part in her story wasn't over. Not yet. Their fates were already tangled in ways she couldn't even imagine. Oh, and before we dive deeper into this emotional story, if you're enjoying Emma and Noah's journey, make sure to subscribe to the channel. It really helps bring more stories like this one to you. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know if you're tuning in from a quiet little town, a busy city, or maybe even from the other side of the world. Emma settled into her seat on the plane, trying to find a comfortable position for herself and her heavy belly. As the plane taxied down the runway, she looked out the tiny window and thought about Noah. There was something about him that left a mark, like he had given her more than just a simple act of kindness. He had left hope behind, something she had almost forgotten how to feel. The plane lifted off and Emma closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing heart. This wasn't just about moving to a new city. It was a desperate attempt to restart her life, to give her child a real chance at something better. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind. Losing her job, the lack of support from her family, the constant fear of not being enough. She could still remember the moment she saw the positive pregnancy test. She remembered that feeling of free fall, like the ground had vanished from under her feet. And now, here she was, heading to Savannah, trying to believe that maybe there was a purpose behind it all. When the plane landed, it was already night. The humid Georgia air wrapped around Emma as soon as she stepped out of the terminal. Savannah's airport was small, welcoming, so different from the cold immensity of New York. She took a deep breath, soaking in the smell of wet grass and salty air. She had made it. She was here. Now she just needed to get to the small hotel where she had booked a cheap room for the first few nights. After that, she would report to the seaside inn where she had gotten a job as a receptionist. Hope was fragile, but it was alive. As she dragged her suitcase across the parking lot, searching for the taxi stand, she felt a presence at her side. "Figured you might need a ride?" Emma froze. She'd recognize that voice anywhere. Turning around, she found Noah standing there, hands tucked into his jeans pockets, that calm smile on his face, and a look in his eyes that felt a whole lot like belonging. "Noah?" she asked, unable to hide her surprise. "What are you doing here?" He shrugged, casual. "Following you." Emma's eyes widened, and she instinctively stepped back half a step. Noah raised his hands, laughing. "Not in a creepy way, I promise. I had business in Savannah too. I just thought, maybe, you could use some help." Emma crossed her arms, suspicious. "Business." Noah nodded, but the way he glanced away told her there was more to that story than he was letting on. Emma wanted to say no. She wanted to keep her distance. But looking at the old, beat-up cab parked in front of her, and feeling the dull ache in her lower back getting worse by the second, she sighed. "All right," she said, "but just to the hotel." Noah smiled, and for a second Emma had the strange feeling that this was the beginning of something she couldn't even start to understand. He grabbed her suitcase, carrying it like it weighed nothing, and led her to a black pickup truck parked near the exit. As they drove through Savannah's quiet streets, Emma stared out the window, trying to ignore the feeling that somehow her life was about to change completely, again. In the driver's seat, Noah looked relaxed, but there was something hidden in his eyes, something big. And Emma, even though she didn't know it yet, was about to uncover the secret Noah Blake was hiding, a secret that tied their lives together in a way neither of them could escape. The truck glided along Savannah's tree-lined streets, the sound of the tires on the wet pavement filling the silence between them. Emma didn't know what to think. Part of her wanted to be grateful for the kindness. The other part was on high alert. She had learned the hard way that life rarely gave you gifts without asking for something back. "So," Noah said, breaking the silence, "which hotel are we headed to?" Emma gave him the address, a small budget hotel a few blocks from the historic district. Noah nodded, keeping his eyes on the road. "You starting work tomorrow?" he asked, like it was the most natural thing. Emma was surprised he remembered. "Yeah." She adjusted the strap of her bag on her lap. "Receptionist at an inn. Nothing glamorous, but it's a start." Noah smiled. That genuine smile she was already beginning to recognize. Every great beginning feels small at first. The words echoed in her mind. Emma looked out the window again. The Spanish moss hanging from the trees swayed in the night breeze, and the historic houses looked like something straight out of an old storybook. Savannah had a way of making you believe life could be different. Slower, kinder, but Emma knew better than to trust too easily. When they reached the hotel, Noah pulled up to the front and got out before Emma could stop him, grabbing her suitcase from the back. She climbed out slowly, feeling her body heavy and her ankles swollen. "Thank you," she said, taking the suitcase from his hands. "Really?" Noah hesitated, like he wanted to say something more. "If you need anything, my number's on the note I slipped into your pocket on the plane." Emma blinked, surprised. "You left a note?" He gave a half smile. "Figured you might need a friend around here." Before she could respond, Noah was already heading back to his truck. Emma watched him leave, the sound of the engine fading into the quiet street. She went into the hotel, checked in, and made her way up to the small room with beige walls and a window that looked out onto a tree-lined street. Sitting on the edge of the bed, exhausted, she finally slipped her hand into her jacket pocket. There it was. A small piece of paper, folded carefully. "If you need a friend, Noah." And underneath it, a phone number. Emma held the note for a long time. She didn't know yet if Noah was a blessing or a complication waiting to happen, but sitting alone in that simple room, with a belly that felt like it carried the weight of the whole world, she decided that maybe, just maybe, it was time to trust a little. She tucked the note into the nightstand drawer, and for the first time in a very long while, she fell asleep without crying. Morning in Savannah was unlike anything Emma had ever known. The streets, still wet from the rain the night before, glistened under the soft light of the rising sun. The air smelled of flowers and damp earth, and there was a calmness there, a silent promise that maybe, just maybe, life could be kinder. Emma stretched out on the narrow hotel bed, her body aching but her mind strangely at peace. The day she had feared for so long had finally arrived, the first day of the rest of her life. She slipped into a simple, comfortable dress, pulled her hair into a quick bun and dabbed some sunscreen on her face. No makeup, no masks. She wanted to start this new chapter just being herself. When she arrived at the inn where she would be working, she was surprised. The building was a restored old colonial house with white porches and blooming gardens. A wooden sign in delicate letters read, "Rosemary Inn, since 1898. Emma took a deep breath and stepped inside. The lobby was cozy, smelling of polished wood and mint tea. A smiling woman with gray hair pulled tightly into a bun greeted her from behind the front desk. "You must be Emma," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Margaret. Welcome to the Rosemary Inn." Emma shook her hand, feeling the icy grip of nerves start to melt. Margaret quickly showed her around. 7 rooms decorated in Victorian style, a small communal kitchen, and a reading room filled with old books. Everything was simple, but cared for with love. "Your job's mostly to welcome guests, manage bookings, and make sure they feel at home," Margaret explained. "Think you can handle it?" Emma smiled, small but genuine. "I might not know everything yet, but I'll do my best." Margaret smiled back, approving. Sometimes your best is exactly what's needed. The morning went by quickly, with Emma learning the booking system and memorizing the names of the guests arriving that week. Her back still hurt and her ankles were still swollen, but there was something different about her now. A purpose, a will to build something from scratch. Around noon, while she was typing information into the inn's old computer, the front doorbell chimed. Emma looked up, and her heart skipped a beat. There he was, Noah, wearing dark jeans and a gray cotton shirt, his hair a little tousled by the wind, and that same steady, calm look, like he had come just to remind her that she wasn't as alone as she thought. Emma stood up, surprised. What are you doing here? Noah lifted a brown paper bag. Lunch. Thought you might need it. Emma blinked, not sure whether to laugh or cry. You don't have to do this. I know, he said, walking over to the desk, but I want to. Emma took the bag, the delicious smell of sandwiches and roasted potatoes filling the air. How did you know where I worked? She asked, suspicious but unable to hide her smile. Noah shrugged. Small town. Word gets around fast. Emma shook her head, amused. You're persistent. Persistent, he corrected, winking. And for the first time in a long time, Emma let out a real laugh. Maybe trusting wasn't so impossible after all. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to do everything alone this time. What Emma didn't know yet was that Noah carried a past full of scars, just like hers, and that the secret he was keeping would change everything, very soon. Emma and Noah sat down in the inn's small staff room, a round wooden table between them, the smell of homemade food filling the air. Emma unwrapped the sandwich, and for the first time in days, felt her stomach growl in approval. You always show up at just the right time? She asked, taking a big bite of whole wheat bread stuffed with grilled chicken and melted cheese. Noah smiled, leaning his elbows on the table. Maybe I just have good instincts. Emma chewed slowly, studying him over the rim of the iced teacup he had also brought. There was something about Noah that was both comforting and unsettling, a calmness that seemed to mask deep, restless waters. She wanted to ask. She wanted to know why he was really there in Savannah, so willing to help someone he barely knew. But the fear of breaking the fragile bubble of normalcy held her back. For now. And you? Emma asked, trying to sound casual. What do you do for a living, Noah? For a second he hesitated. It was so quick it almost went unnoticed. Almost. I worked on restoring old houses for a while, he said. Then did some consulting work for historic properties. Emma raised an eyebrow. Consulting? Sounds fancy. Noah laughed, a deep, pleasant sound. Not as fancy as it sounds. Way more dust and rotten wood than glamour. She smiled, imagining him covered in dust, fixing up old houses. It made sense. Noah seemed like someone who liked fixing broken things, maybe even broken people. And now? She asked, curious. You here to fix up some crumbling old house? Noah looked at her, and this time the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. Something like that. Emma frowned, but before she could ask more, Margaret walked into the room. Emma, sorry to interrupt, but we've got a new guest arriving, she said with a smile. Can you come with me? Emma nodded, wiping her hands with a napkin. Noah stood too. I'll let you get back to work, he said, stuffing his hands into his pockets, suddenly looking a little out of place. Call me if you need anything, okay? Emma hesitated, then nodded. Thank you, Noah. He smiled again. That smile that seemed to promise no matter what happened he'd be around. Emma watched him leave through the glass door, the fading afternoon light bathing his broad shoulders. Something inside her whispered that this man wasn't just a coincidence in her life. He was part of something much bigger, something she couldn't understand yet. As she turned to greet the new guest, Emma felt for the first time in a long while that the stranger who had crossed her path at the airport wasn't just a fleeting help. He was a turning point. And her story was just beginning to be written. The end of the day came faster than Emma expected. After showing the new guest, a sweet elderly couple who praised her manners, to their room, she spent the last few hours organizing upcoming reservations and prepping the front desk for the morning shift. By the time Margaret let her go, it was already night. Emma walked through the quiet streets of Savannah back to the cheap hotel where she was staying. The night air was humid, but there was something welcoming about the city, a feeling that even if she felt lost, she wasn't truly alone. In the simple room, she kicked off her shoes and collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. Out of reflex, she grabbed the note Noah had left in her jacket pocket, now carefully tucked away in the nightstand drawer. She ran her fingers over the paper, thinking. Should she call? The cautious side of her, the one she had worked so hard to build these past months, said no. It was better to keep her distance. But there was something stronger, something that made her want to trust. Before she could overthink it, she dialed the number. The phone rang twice before it was picked up. Emma? Noah's voice came through the line as if he already knew it was her. Emma bit her lip, lying sideways on the bed. Hey, I just wanted to say thank you. For lunch. For everything. She suddenly felt ridiculous, like she was forcing an unnecessary call. But Noah didn't leave room for the discomfort to grow. I'm glad you called. How was your first day? Emma smiled, relaxing against the pillow. It was good. Tiring. But good. And the hotel? He asked. Emma hesitated. She glanced around. The walls were thin, the bed was uncomfortable, and the street outside seemed busier than she'd like for a peaceful night's sleep. I've stayed in worse places, she said, trying to sound optimistic. Noah chuckled softly. If you want, I can help you look for a better place tomorrow. I know a few people around town. Emma wanted to say no. She wanted to prove she could handle everything on her own. But the truth was, the baby didn't leave her that luxury anymore. She needed to be practical. I'd appreciate that. Great. I'll pick you up after work tomorrow? Sounds good, Emma said, feeling a strange warmth fill her chest. They said goodbye with simple words, but what lingered between them was much more than anything either of them said out loud. Emma hung up, hugging her pillow. Noah Blake was a mystery, but for the first time in a long time, Emma was willing to accept that not every stranger was a threat. Some brought possibilities. She closed her eyes, letting exhaustion pull her under. Outside the window, Savannah whispered in its ancient language, promising new beginnings to those brave enough to believe in them. And Emma Blake was finally beginning to believe. The next day started with a quick storm. From the inn's window, Emma watched the thick raindrops sliding down the glass as she greeted the first guests of the day. The city seemed quieter under the rain, like it was taking a deep breath. Emma liked that calm. She liked feeling, for the first time in a long time, that the world wasn't working against her. Around noon, Noah showed up at the front desk, a closed black umbrella in one hand and his calm smile in place. Ready to find a new home? He asked, leaning casually against the counter. Emma smiled, surprised by how natural it felt to see Noah there, like he was just part of the scenery now. Margaret, Emma called to her boss. I'm heading out to look for a better place to stay. I'll be back later this afternoon. Margaret waved without looking up, busy sorting papers. Emma grabbed her bag and followed Noah to the truck. They drove through streets lined with oak trees and colorful little houses, passing quiet squares and cobblestone avenues that seemed frozen in time. Noah didn't talk much, but when he did, it was with a lightness that made Emma forget, even if just for a moment, the heavy weight she carried. I set up an appointment with a local realtor, he said, pulling up in front of a small yellow house with a white porch. Nothing too big, but it's clean, safe, and there's enough room for two. Emma looked at him, surprised by the choice of words. Two, she repeated, placing a protective hand over her belly. Noah just smiled. You and him, he said, nodding slightly at her belly. Or her. Emma smiled, feeling a little shy at the tenderness in his voice. They got out of the truck and were greeted by a middle-aged woman named Carol, the realtor. The house was simple. 2 bedrooms, a bright living room, a small kitchen, and a backyard surrounded by trees. The rent was tight for Emma's budget, but not impossible. As Carol showed them around, Emma found herself imagining a life there, seeing the baby play on the living room rug, making simple dinners in the little kitchen, putting flowers out on the porch. It was more than a house. It was a chance to build something new. Carol smiled warmly at Emma and Noah as they finished the tour. You two make a lovely couple, she said casually. This place will be perfect to start your life together. Emma choked a little, opening her mouth to correct her, but Noah just gave a polite smile and said nothing. On the way back to the truck, Emma huffed, still blushing. She thinks we're a couple. Noah opened the door for her and shrugged. Could be worse. She could have thought I was your brother. Emma laughed, a real light laugh that escaped before she could hold it back. And Noah laughed too, a sound that warmed more than the afternoon sun. Noah didn't say anything more about it. Neither did she. But in that brief moment inside that truck, they both felt it. That kind of thing you don't need to explain. You just feel. Noah dropped Emma off at the hotel, promising to meet her over the weekend to help with the move if she decided to rent the house. Emma spent that night lying on the thin bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the rhythmic tapping of rain against the window. A house of her own. A new life starting to take shape. And right in the middle of it all, Noah. She didn't understand why he was so willing to help her. It didn't make sense. People like him, people who seemed to have the world at their feet, didn't usually stick around for people like her, broken, fragile, wary. But Noah didn't seem like he was there to save Emma. Not in a way that made her feel small, but in a way that said, "I'm here if you want me to be." And that was scary in the best possible way. The next morning, Emma went back to the inn for another day of work. Everything felt normal. Guests sipping coffee on the porch, Margaret shuffling papers behind the desk, the smell of fresh bread wafting in from the kitchen. But just after lunch, a new guest arrived. He was different from the others, wearing an expensive suit, carrying a genuine leather suitcase, and sporting a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Emma greeted him with her usual politeness. "Welcome to the Rosemary Inn. My name's Emma. How can I help you?" The man set down his suitcase and leaned slightly over the counter. "I'm looking for Noah Blake." Emma froze. For a second, the whole world seemed to stop, her automatic smile dying on her lips. "I'm sorry," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But he's not staying here." The man studied her for a moment, like he was trying to decide if he believed her or not. "Are you sure?" he pressed. "He specifically described this hotel." Emma swallowed hard. "Described it? Why?" "I can double-check if you'd like," she said, trying to sound casual. The man gave her a smile that made her skin crawl. "Don't worry," he said, picking up his suitcase. "I'm sure I'll find him." Emma stood behind the counter, watching him disappear up the stairs. Her heart pounded in her chest. She knew Noah carried secrets. She knew there was more to him than the calm appearance he showed the world. But what she didn't know was that the past he had tried so hard to leave behind had just caught up with him. And now, without meaning to, Emma was right in the middle of it. Emma tried to get back to work, but her mind wouldn't stop spinning. Who was that man? Why was he looking for Noah? And more importantly, what kind of trouble was Noah hiding from? Later that afternoon, when things had quieted down, Emma sent a quick text to Noah. "Someone's looking for you at the inn. He seemed strange. Are you okay?" The time it took for a reply felt like an eternity. Finally, her phone screen lit up. "I'm coming, don't say anything to him. Trust me." Emma swallowed hard, her stomach twisting. Minutes later, Noah walked through the front door of the inn, his expression tighter than she'd ever seen. He moved quickly, controlled, straight to the counter. "Is he still here?" he asked in a low voice. Emma nodded, subtly indicating the lounge area where the man was casually flipping through an old magazine, as if waiting for something, or someone. Noah took a deep breath, weighing his options. "Stay here," he said, his tone serious. "Don't get involved, okay?" Emma wanted to protest, wanted to say she didn't like being left out of whatever was happening, but the look in his eyes left no room for argument. She watched him cross the lobby, every muscle in his body tense like a wire about to snap. The man looked up from the magazine and smiled when he saw Noah approaching. "Finally," he said, like they were old friends. Emma pretended to organize papers behind the counter, but she listened closely, catching every word, every move. "You shouldn't be here, Carter," Noah said, his voice low and carrying something Emma had never heard from him before. "Threat." Carter chuckled softly like he was humoring an angry child. "You know that's not how it works. When people disappear off the map, Noah, someone always comes looking." Noah crossed his arms. "I've got nothing left for you. I'm out. It's over." Carter shook his head, his smile fading. "You know it's not over. Not for them. You owe favors, Noah, and you know favors. They come with a price." Emma felt the blood drain from her face. Favors? Price? What were they talking about? Noah didn't answer right away. He just stood there, still and solid, like a rock standing against the tide. "I'm not that guy anymore," he said firmly. "I've changed." Carter gave a short, humorless laugh. "Change is a luxury you can't afford." Without waiting for a response, Carter stood up, adjusted his expensive jacket, and said before walking out, "They'll wait." But not for long. And just like that, he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft thud. Emma looked at Noah, her chest tight. He stood there for a few seconds longer, his shoulders tense as if he was carrying the weight of the world. When he finally turned to her, Emma saw it. She saw the pain. She saw the guilt. She saw the silent war he was fighting. And she knew in that instant that Noah Blake wasn't just the man who had helped her at the airport. He was a man trying to escape a past that refused to let him go. And whether she wanted to or not, Emma was now part of that story. The silence between Emma and Noah felt too heavy to break. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the already tousled dark strands, his eyes lost somewhere on the floor. Emma didn't know what to say. Any words seemed too small compared to what had just happened. Finally, Noah took a deep breath and looked up at her. "I'm sorry you had to see that." His voice was rough, filled with exhaustion. Emma took a step toward him, hesitating before she asked, "Who was he, Noah?" He closed his eyes briefly, like he was gathering strength to answer. "Someone from my past." Emma crossed her arms, trying to stay calm. "What kind of past?" Noah looked at her with such raw pain in his eyes that Emma almost stepped back. "I used to do things I'm not proud of," he said, his voice low. "Jobs for the wrong kind of people. When my sister died, I lost myself. Made bad choices, Emma, really bad ones." Emma felt her heart tighten. "And now," she whispered, "you're trying to get out?" Noah nodded, his jaw clenched tight. "I got out 2 years ago. Cut every tie, started over. I came to Savannah because it's a place where I could be different, where I could be someone better." Emma watched him, trying to take it all in. Noah wasn't perfect, not even close. But standing there in front of her, he wasn't a criminal. He wasn't a threat. He was just a man fighting to leave behind the shadows that tried to pull him under. "Will they come back?" Emma asked, her voice barely a whisper. Noah hesitated. "Probably." A chill ran down Emma's spine. She thought about the baby, about the house she hadn't rented yet, about the life she was trying so hard to rebuild. And she thought about Noah, the man who had knelt beside her in a crowded airport and held her hand when no one else did. "I'm not going anywhere," Noah said firmly, as if reading her mind. "I'm not leaving you in the middle of this." Emma shook her head, her throat tight. "It's not just about me," she murmured, her hand instinctively moving to her belly. Noah looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes nearly broke her. "Especially because of that," he said. "I promise you, Emma, I'll keep you both safe." She believed him, not because he promised, but because for the first time in a very long time, Emma felt like she wasn't fighting alone. Noah Blake wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was a second chance. Even if the world tried to say otherwise. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm, a mix of normalcy and quiet tension. Emma kept working at the inn, smiling at guests, handling bookings, answering emails, trying to keep her mind busy. Noah kept showing up. Sometimes he brought lunch. Other times he just leaned against the counter, said a few words, and left. As if just seeing her reminded him that there were still good things in the world. They avoided talking about Carter, about Noah's past, about the looming threat hanging over them like a dark cloud. But the silence said everything they didn't have the courage to say out loud. They were tied together now. In a way, no threat could undo. One humid afternoon, after her shift ended, Noah showed up at the inn to pick her up. "Come on," he said, flashing a small smile. "I want to show you something." Emma hesitated. She was tired, her ankles were sore, and the weight of her belly felt heavier by the minute. But something in his face, something in his eyes, made her say yes. They climbed into the truck and drove through Savannah's quiet streets until they turned onto a dirt road winding through open fields. Emma looked out the window, curious. "Where are we going?" Noah smiled but didn't answer. When he finally stopped the truck, they were standing in front of a wide-open field surrounded by ancient oak trees draped in Spanish moss. The sky was golden with the setting sun, and a fresh breeze carried the scent of cut grass and wildflowers. Emma carefully stepped out of the truck, taking in the view. Noah walked to the center of the field and turned back to her. "When everything started falling apart in my life, I used to come here," he said, his voice calm. "It was the only place where I could remember who I wanted to be." Emma stood still, listening to the wind rustling through the trees, feeling the weight of his words settle over her. "I thought you might like to see it," Noah added. Emma walked toward him, her hand instinctively resting on her belly. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "It's peace," Noah corrected, gazing out at the horizon. And you deserve peace, Emma. She blinked, feeling tears threaten. She hadn't cried in a long time. She'd learned to be tough, to be practical, but there under the golden sky in that forgotten corner of the world, with this man carrying his own scars, Emma felt a hope so strong it almost hurt. You do too, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Noah turned to face her. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. There were no promises, no demands, just the silent understanding of two tired souls who, for some reason, had found each other. And maybe the peace they were looking for wasn't just in the quiet field around them. Maybe it was in each other's eyes. The drive back to Savannah was quiet, but full of unspoken thoughts. Emma stared out the truck window, her face bathed in the fading golden light, feeling something growing inside her. Something that wasn't fear. It wasn't doubt. It was hope. When they got back to the city, Noah pulled up in front of the hotel where Emma was still staying. He turned off the engine but made no move to get out of the truck. Emma stayed quiet too, her hand resting on her belly, feeling the small life inside her shift lightly, like he somehow knew something important was happening. Emma, Noah began, his voice low and careful. I know my life's not simple, and I know you've already got more than enough to worry about. She turned to him, her heart beating faster. But I want to help you, Noah continued. Not just now. I want to be here, with you. Emma blinked, the world around her blurring with tears that refused to fall. You don't even really know me, she whispered. Noah smiled, a small, tender smile. I know what matters. Emma wanted to resist. She wanted to throw up all the walls she'd spent her whole life building. But there was something in the way Noah said those words. A way that asked for nothing in return. A way that simply offered. I can't promise it'll be easy, she said, her voice cracking. I don't know if I even know how to trust again. You don't have to trust all at once, Noah answered without hesitation. One step at a time. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, trying to find strength inside herself. And when she opened them, she saw Noah there waiting. No pressure, no demands, just waiting. She nodded slowly. One step at a time, Noah's smile grew, and in that instant, Emma felt something shift between them. Something silent, but as real as the breeze blowing in from the nearby sea. Noah climbed out of the truck and walked around to open her door. Emma took his offered hand, feeling the steadiness and calm he carried. As they walked to the hotel entrance, Emma knew she was taking more than just a step down that dimly lit sidewalk. She was stepping into a new life. A life where she and her baby wouldn't be alone. And even though Noah's past still loomed like a threatening shadow, Emma chose to believe that together they could find the light. The weekend arrived quickly, bringing with it a cool breeze that seemed to carry new promises. Noah showed up on Saturday morning with the truck loaded with empty boxes and a determined look on his face. Emma, her belly feeling heavier with each passing day, watched him from the hotel porch, feeling a strange mix of nerves and gratitude. Ready to change your life? He asked, flashing that crooked smile that was becoming dangerously familiar to her heart. Emma smiled back, adjusting the strap of her bag on her shoulder, more ready than ever. The move to the little yellow house was quicker than Emma had expected. She didn't have much, just some clothes, books, and small objects that carried the last memories of her old life. Noah carried everything with impressive ease, refusing any help from her other than pointing to where she wanted the boxes. You're already carrying a whole world in there, he said, nodding toward her belly with a gentle smile. Let me handle the rest. Emma laughed, shaking her head, but let herself be taken care of. The house already felt different, alive. The open windows let in the scent of damp earth and flowers. Sunlight danced on the yellow walls, and the sound of birds filled every room. It was a new beginning, tangible, real. After the last box was placed in the living room, Noah suggested a break. Come on, he said, taking her hand. I've got one more surprise. Emma frowned, suspicious, but let herself be led out to the backyard. In the middle of the grass, laid out on a checkered blanket, was a carefully arranged picnic basket. Emma brought a hand to her mouth, moved. Noah, he shrugged, looking a little shy, thought it might be nice to celebrate. They sat down on the blanket, Emma trying to find a comfortable position while Noah pulled sandwiches, fresh fruit, and apple juice from the basket. They ate in silence, sharing smiles and glances that spoke volumes without a single word. After a while, Noah leaned back on his elbows, gazing up at the blue sky. "You know," he said, "when I first came to Savannah, I thought I was just running away from who I was." Emma turned to him, curious. "And now?" He smiled, turning his head to look at her. "Now I think I was running toward you." The air between them grew thick, like the whole world had paused to hear those words. Emma didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to handle the intensity of it. But deep down, a soft voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, she had found something she hadn't even known she was searching for. Peace, belonging, love. And as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky orange and pink, Emma knew that despite all the fear and shadows, she didn't want to run anymore. Not when something this real was waiting for her. Something that, for the first time in a long time, felt safe. Sunday morning came quietly, a light mist hanging over Savannah. Emma woke early, listening to the distant singing of birds. She stretched slowly, her body sore from the move the day before but filled with a new feeling, belonging. The little yellow house was already starting to feel like home. After breakfast and unpacking a few more boxes, Emma decided to step out onto the front porch. She found Noah leaning against the railing, a cup of coffee in his hands, his gaze lost on the horizon. He turned his head as he felt her presence and smiled. "Sleep well?" Emma nodded, hugging her arms against the morning chill. "Better than I have in months." For a moment, they stood in silence, watching the world wake up. Emma knew she had to ask, even though part of her wished she could pretend the outside world didn't exist. "Noah," she began hesitantly. "What happens now?" He understood what she meant. About Carter, about the past, about the dangers that might still come knocking. Noah set his mug down on the railing and turned fully to face her. "I'm handling it," he said, his voice firm. "I talked to a few people. Carter's not the real problem. It's the men he works for." Emma felt a chill run through her. "They're still after you?" "Maybe." Noah ran a hand through his hair. "But I won't let them get to you. To either of you." Emma wanted to believe him. And deep down she did, not because Noah promised it with words, but because everything about the way he stood there told her he meant every word. "I know how to take care of myself," she whispered stubbornly. Noah smiled, that sad, tender smile that made her chest ache. "I know you do, but now, you don't have to do it alone." Emma blinked, swallowing the lump rising in her throat. For so long, fighting alone had been her only way to survive. Now, having someone stand beside her was terrifying, but it was also freeing. Noah held out his hand to her. "Want to take a walk?" he offered. "There's a place I want to show you." Emma hesitated just a moment before she took his hand. They walked slowly through the quiet streets of Savannah, side by side, in no hurry. Noah led her to a small hidden park, tucked behind a row of historic homes. There was a serene lake surrounded by ancient trees and iron benches. Wild flowers colored the edges of the water, and the sound of the breeze dancing through the leaves was the only music they needed. "When my sister was alive, we used to come here," Noah said, stopping by the lake. "It was her favorite place." Emma looked at him, surprised. Noah rarely talked about his sister. "She used to say this was the only place where time stood still," he continued, his voice full of memories. "Where nothing bad could happen." Emma squeezed his hand gently, a silent gesture of support. "I wanted to bring you here," Noah said, his eyes locking onto hers with a force that took her breath away. "Because somehow you brought me back to that kind of peace." Emma felt her eyes fill with tears, not from sadness, but from a gratitude so deep it ached. "I don't even know what to say," she whispered. Noah smiled. "Just stay. That's enough." And she stayed. Right there, in that little park hidden from the world, Emma Blake stayed. For herself, for her baby, for Noah, and for everything they could build together, even if the outside world still tried to tear them down. The next days felt like living in a bubble of calm. Emma and Noah spent most of their time together, fixing up the house, assembling the crib Noah insisted on buying, picking out little decorations to make the simple space feel like a real home. At night, they would sit on the porch and watch the sunset. They didn't talk much, but just being near each other was enough. Still, Emma knew that peace was fragile, and Noah's past hadn't disappeared completely. That certainty came crashing through their door one Tuesday afternoon. Emma was in the kitchen making tea when she heard the screech of tires on the dirt road in front of the house. She glanced out the window and felt her heart freeze. 2 black cars. Men in dark suits. She didn't need to be an expert to know they weren't there for a friendly visit. She rushed to the front door just as Noah appeared from the garage, where he had been organizing some tools. He saw the cars and stopped cold. Emma watched the change come over him in seconds. The tense stance, the sharp, alert gaze, the pure instinct to protect kicking in. "Emma," he said, his voice firm and low. "Get inside and lock the door. Now." "Noah," her voice cracked, fear tightening around her chest. "Now, Emma, please." She hesitated for just a second before obeying, locking the door and stepping away from the window. Outside, Noah walked to the edge of the porch, his whole body braced for the fight he knew he couldn't avoid. The men climbed out of the cars. Carter was among them, the same cold smile on his lips. "Nice little house," Carter said, glancing around like he already owned the place. "Be a shame if something happened to it." Noah didn't answer. He just stood firm, his fists clenched at his sides. Another man, taller and far more dangerous looking, stepped forward. "You've had enough time, Blake. Now it's time to pay up." Noah could feel Emma watching from the window, could feel the weight of her trust on his shoulders. He wasn't going to let his past destroy the future he was finally starting to build. "I've got nothing for you," he said, his voice controlled but full of a silent fury. The tall man smiled. A soulless, empty smile. "Then we'll take what we need. By force, if we have to." Noah took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "You're not touching her. Or the baby." Emma, listening from the other side of the door, heard every word and felt her heart nearly explode from her chest. The man shrugged, like it didn't matter. And then Noah did something they didn't expect. Without hesitation, he pulled a small recorder from his pocket and pressed play. The voices that filled the air were unmistakable. Clear threats, extortion, all caught on tape. "I warned you," Noah said calmly. "I talked to the police. They're on their way." Carter's smirk died instantly. The tall man's eyes narrowed in fury. Sirens began to wail in the distance. For a second, everyone froze. Then, like predators realizing the prey had turned the tables, the men scrambled back into their cars and sped away down the dirt road. Noah stood there, his chest rising and falling sharply, until he saw the flashing lights of the approaching patrol cars. Emma opened the door slowly, tears streaming silently down her face. Noah climbed the steps back onto the porch and without a word pulled her into his arms. Emma clung to him, her body shaking with relief and fear. "It's over," Noah whispered, his voice rough against her hair. "It's over, Emma." And for the first time in a very long time, she believed it. The threat was gone. Noah's past hadn't won. Their future finally seemed possible. The weeks that followed brought a peace Emma hadn't even known could exist. Without the constant shadow of fear, life in the little yellow house began to blossom. Emma decorated every room with care. Light curtains on the windows, floral pillows on the old couch, books lined up neatly on the shelves. Every little detail seemed to say, "This is our home." Noah, for his part, found a job at a workshop restoring antique furniture. It suited him perfectly. Steady hands, endless patience, and a soul that valued things with history. They settled into a simple, quiet routine. Short walks in the late afternoons, tea on the porch at dusk, spontaneous laughter filling the house with warmth, and more, the feeling that they belonged to each other. One evening, as Emma was arranging baby clothes in the new nursery, Noah appeared in the doorway, leaning casually against the frame, just watching her. Emma smiled when she saw him. "Think he'll like it?" she asked, holding up a tiny shirt embroidered with the words, "Adventure in Progress." Noah chuckled and walked over to her. "I think he's going to love it," he said, running a hand gently over her belly. Emma held her breath for a moment. His touch still made her heart race. Noah hesitated like he was gathering courage for something. Then, in a calm gesture, he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Emma's eyes widened, her heart stalling for a second. "Noah," he dropped to one knee in front of her, wearing the most serious, beautiful expression she'd ever seen. "Emma Blake," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. I'm not a perfect man. I come with scars, with mistakes, with a complicated past. He opened the box, revealing a simple but stunning ring. But what I feel for you, it's the one thing I'm absolutely sure of. Tears welled up uncontrollably in Emma's eyes. You saved me, Emma, without even knowing it. He took a deep breath, his gaze locked on hers. Marry me? Let's build this life together. The three of us. Emma covered her mouth with her hand, unable to stop the sob that escaped. For a second, she saw the entire road that had led her here. The losses, the lonely nights, the moments she thought she'd never find peace again. And now, standing before her, was the future she had never even dared to dream about. With her voice thick but full of certainty, Emma answered, "Yes." Noah's smile lit up the room as he slipped the ring onto her finger. He stood and pulled her into a tight embrace, the kind of hug that promised that no matter what came next, they would face it together. Emma rested her head against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. There, in that little room lit by the soft glow of a bedside lamp, with the smell of fresh wood and the sound of rain beginning to fall outside, Emma knew she wasn't just starting a new life. She had found her home. In Noah's arms, in the laughter of the son who would soon arrive, in the quiet certainty that sometimes what seems like an ending is really just the most beautiful beginning of all. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. Stories like this remind us that love, courage, and new beginnings are always within reach.